All right. All right. So, I don't know who knows this, but there's this girl called Naima, and she has been on Jubilee a few times, a couple other programs. She did pretty well. Not well, she did good enough against Charlie Kirk on a few occasions. They weren't very long interactions. Um, But this is the last of the debates from the whatever podcast debate week that basically just happened. And she decided to go toe to toe with Andrew Wilson for 3 hours and 48 minutes approximately. Um, I have higher hopes than I did for the other contestants we saw, but we'll see. Um, We'll see. So far, it was a pretty rough showing. We had that podcast guy, Raphael. He had no refutation or argument for anything he came up with. That was really a bummer. Then we had Oliver, the guy who debated Jim Bob before, and that was supremely disappointing as well. I didn't cover that one live because it's just not really interesting listening to Oliver debate. Um, he's like really, really, it's all really ideologically driven. There's not a lot of substance there. Um, then we had, what was her name? Kylie. That was a disaster, unmitigated disaster. She was atrocious. She rage quit. She threatened to rage quit after like 60 seconds of actual debate. She interrupted the opening statements twice. At one point, she was crying. Um, a fan of hers had to pay to bail her out of the situation. It was just a mess. The whole thing was a mess. Now, that being said, uh, Naima could be a little better. She has a little more experience speaking with these like big conservative pundits. So we'll see. Yeah, even in the title, she's Naima from Jubilee. I don't agree with all of her stuff, but yeah, we'll see what happens. She is still just like a college student with like TikTok and whatever, but you know, hopefully she does a better job than the other three because they were an embarrassment. And without further ado, here we go.
Edition of the Whatever Podcast coming to you live from Santa Barbara, California. I'm your host and moderator, Brian Atlas. A few quick announcements before the show begins. This podcast is viewer supported. Heavy YouTube demonetization, so please consider donating through Streamlabs instead of soup chatting, as YouTube takes a brutal 30% cut. That's streamlabs.com/whatever. Link is in the description. We prioritize messages that are made via Streamlabs. To read a message is $199, or excuse me, not $199, $200 and up, $199 and up. We will read those in batches at various breaks throughout the debate. There will be no instant TTS, and I do ask that the audience has good discipline when it comes to the super chats and the chats. And if you want to criticize, attack the idea, not the person. Now, if you want to just tip and have 100% of your contribution go towards us, no platform fees, no cut, you can via Venmo or Cash App, whatever, pod on both. The link is in the description. We're also live on Twitch right now. Pull up another tab, go to twitch.tv/whatever, and drop us a follow in the Prime sub if you have one. Quick disclaimer, the views expressed by the guests do not necessarily reflect the views of the debater and political commentator. Also joining us to California, she's a feminist. The show is for messages. Go ahead.
Yeah, so my position on feminism is that it's terrible for society. as we go through this, I'll kind of flesh that view out using what I call force doctrine so that you can understand why I have that same set. But force doctrine basically just states that while feminism definitionally is the movement towards egalitarianism and equity for the removal of patriarchal systems, that feminists will always have to appeal to patriarchy in order to try to remove patriarchy, which is ironically hilarious. But a few things I wanted to get to first is that I went through several hours of my opponent's content, and I've actually not ever seen her make a single argument for anything that she believes. No, I've seen her assert a lot of things, but not an argument for anything she actually believes. So I have some notes here, and I was hoping she could help me clear some of these things up. From the Surrounded September 8th, 2024 episode, she says abortion is murder. The prompt is abortion is murder and should be illegal. She asked for a viability time for 20 weeks and thinks abortion before 20 weeks is acceptable. She says the fetus is technically classified as a parasite. The fetus cannot exist outside.
I don't think that's true, just based on the definition of parasite. The abortion thing is so cringe, nerd, AIDS, garbage.
The womb and therefore is a parasite. The actual definitions don't support this. An organism living in, on, or with another organism in order to obtain nutrients, grow, multiply. That would be an actual definition of a parasite or someone or something that resembles a biological parasite living off of, being dependent on, or exploring another. Fetuses can't fit that definitionally. Fetus is the same species. Biological parasites are classified as other, not the same species. Also, mutual biology. Mothers and fetus co-adapt, and mothers are actually healthier while they're pregnant, so they can't really be a parasite. Parasites are rarely temporary, and fetuses are, so and none of that fits the criteria for a parasite. On our video Middle Ground, Progressives versus Moderates, and this is from January 19th, she says the prompt is, does the far left make Democrats lose elections? She said Kamala was not progressive enough, not far left enough. She talks about how women's rights are being stripped, but didn't give any examples of what those are. So I'm actually really confused about a lot of her positions, including in her rematch against Charlie Kirk that happened March 5th, 2025, why DEI is unlawful. Her rebuttal to Kirk was bizarre. It just had something to do with there's no racial factor in DEI, even though Kirk gave a pretty good rebuttal for that. So I'd like her to kind of dive into what she actually believes within the paradigm of feminism. But for my positive position, I will say I have a logical argument called force doctrine, and my logical argument called force doctrine refutes the feminist ideology, and it just works.
It refutes a few specific types of feminist ideology, specifically those that call for the complete dismantling of patriarchy. There are other types of feminism that do not call for the dismantling of patriarchy, and force doctrine does not refute those types of feminism.
As I explained before, that patriarchy must always be appealed to in order to try to eliminate patriarchy. Women can't enforce their own rights collectively, and men can. Therefore, women always have to appeal collectively to men for their rights. So you're always going to essentially have a patriarchy through force doctrine, and there's nothing women can do about that. So I'm willing to logically go through that and have it examined rigorously, but I'm hoping that with that, you can also describe your positions so that I understand them better.
All right. Thank you, Andrew. If you'd like to give your opening statement.
Yes, thank you, Andrew.
That was basically the classic Andrew Wilson intro there. A shorter version, though. Very concise and to the point that time. Let's see how she does.
True. I do think that is an interesting claim that I don't, state my arguments, because I've actually been watching some of your content, and I've noticed kind of a similar trend as well within these debates, where you will ask your debater questions but will not put forth your argument, including in your opening statement. You state force doctrine, but instead of elaborating on it, you consistently talk about what I've talked about, which only one of those topics was actually related to feminism. Now, when it comes to my actual beliefs, I think my goal and my hope for this country is to see us advance as a society. I would like to see everyone have bodily autonomy, and I would like for the vast majority of people, if not everyone, to have their basic needs met. And I would like to mitigate any unnecessary conflict between the citizens of this country, genuinely. I think that my main issue with the manosphere and with your forced doctrine principle is that it promotes and spreads divisiveness against men and women. It promotes and spreads violence against men and women, and it exaggerates and focuses the differences between the genders. I think that men and women, I know men and women are the same species. We are 99% genetically similar, and the obsessive need to define and separate people based on one singular chromosome is...
That 1% is a huge difference. It's a huge difference. It completely changes our physical makeup and a lot of, how we think and react to stuff. So I don't know. I'm not really sold on that line.
Doing both men and women a disservice, socially, economically, and politically, which we can get into. I'm ready to open it up if you want to.
Yeah,
I
sure.
guess actually I'd love to start with a question for you. I would like to go back to the forced doctrine theory, if we can. I just kind of want to understand more. I know you've talked a lot about the equal force objection in the past. You've said men have essentially a monopoly on force.
Correct.
If I'm correct. Okay, perfect.
Do you want me to walk you through the argument?
No, I'm going to elaborate. Thank you. And that rights exist through physical force, and that our legal system is based on physical force. So I guess I kind of just want to hear you elaborate on that now, if you're welcome.
So you want my argument for the force doctrine?
Yep.
Okay, so what force doctrine is saying is very simple. That feminism, if you at least agree with my definition, and it seems broadly feminists do, that it's a movement towards egalitarianism and equity and the removal of patriarchy. If you can't have an oppressed class without an oppressor class, at least not from the Marxist feminist view. In the case, if women are being oppressed, they're not being oppressed by wolves, they're being oppressed by men, right? So if that's the case, then my argument to them is that whatever you believe this oppression is, you will actually have to appeal to men in order to either relinquish whatever this oppression is, or concede to whatever it is that they want, because collectively women actually cannot overthrow any patriarchal systems. They rely on the force of men. And so if men, anytime they want to, decide to remove women's rights, there's actually not anything women can do about it, but the opposition is not true. The opposite is not true. Women cannot collectivize and take away men's rights.
Okay, so are you essentially saying that women do not deserve the right to fight for their own free will or have free will?
Yeah, that's an ought claim. I'm not making an ought claim. I'm trying to get us to the descriptor first. So instead of making a prescriptive statement, I'm starting with a descriptive statement. What is true? And then we can worry about what should be true after we can determine what is true.
Okay, but I'm trying to see, like, structurally, how does that work in the real world? Are you saying that women should not fight for their rights because they...
Listen, let's back up so I can distinguish two things.
Okay.
Is, ought, right?
Sure.
I'm not trying to bridge the is-ought gap. I'm trying to start with a descriptive claim. So if the descriptive claim is true, then we can move to the prescriptive side of it. But right now, you would either need to agree with me that descriptively I'm right or that descriptively I'm wrong.
I can't agree with you to say that descriptively you're right until you apply what you're saying in theory to the practice of modern day society. How does your equal force objection, how does this principle work in society? What are you saying in terms of how women and men coexist?
Yeah, I think that because that is the case, that men deserve to have various privileges that they're not given in society, which they should be given in society.
So what are the privileges that you think that men should have that women should not have?
Well, primarily, I think that if you're going to look at an equalization, what I would do prescriptively would be to roll voting back. And that's for both sexes. I think that rolling voting back for both sexes is a good idea, and have some sort of perhaps like one house voting system. Or
the problem with all of so he's going to do the one house voting system. He's going to do the some kind of service to your country. Sometimes he says 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. It's always unpaid. The problem with all of these is that you actually, in any of them, you would lose a chunk of highly intelligent voters. And his argument kind of always boils down to he doesn't want unintelligent or uninformed voters canceling out the votes of informed or intelligent voters. But if it's just performing a service to the country for 5 years, like, anyone can do that. Almost anyone can do that. And now they get to vote, and he probably won't think that those people are always super intelligent or informed. Same thing with the marriage or family version of that. Anyone can get married and have kids. The poorest people in society tend to actually have the most kids. So I don't actually think Andrew believes either of those things would be better. I just don't buy it.
One marriage voting system, or people who have done some sort of collective service to the state for a voting system.
Yeah, collective
I think
service
that
to the
those
state.
things would all be very good systems for everybody.
Why?
Now, I would apply that, I would apply that broadly to men, and I would apply that to women. I think that right now men get the shaft because men are...
At least he's not doing the outright women shouldn't vote thing. He seems to have rolled back on that a little bit.
Men are required to do a lot of jobs that women are not, which keeps society going, and women are not doing those things. And because of that, I don't understand why it is that women can nullify their votes and disenfranchise them, and most importantly, vote to send them to wars they don't have to go fight in.
So you would like to disenfranchise both the men and women's votes?
Mostly. Most of them, yes. I think would be a better idea.
What would this achieve?
Well, it would be that it would achieve the same thing our founders basically wanted to achieve, which is that they thought that you would have to have a stake in the country in order to vote.
But if you live in the country and if you exist in the country and if you're being legislated by the laws that the country is making, don't you have a stake in that?
No, not always.
You don't?
In fact, many times you don't. Many times, many people actually get more back from the state than they put into the state. So that's at the expense of other people.
Who is that?
But you're still subject to the laws and regulations of that state. And also, he didn't make the argument that net taxpayers should be the ones who can vote. He's kind of moving the goalposts around a little bit. We'll see where it goes.
So there's lots of people who get a mass amount back from the government that they never pay to the government. This can happen through things like Social Security disability, things like welfare, things like even earned income child credit that you may receive even though you don't actually pay anything into the system or very little into the system.
But it's a crime to lie on your taxes and commit. Isn't that tax fraud to claim a dependent?
No. There's just...
That is...
Oh no, she's confused. She thinks he means people that are lying to get... He means the legitimate or legally legitimate tax burden that most people are on society. They get more from the system legitimately than they put into the system legitimately. She thinks he's talking about like people who commit tax fraud. He's not talking about that.
No, it's not listen, it's not tax fraud. I'm saying that there's people who get more out of the system than they put into the system.
Okay, but they're still at stake because they still live here now. Are their lives not